Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Reid Wissler, Senior Design Engineer at V Technologies, to discuss an essential aspect of product design, considering that voiceless stakeholder. Now, with over 37 years of experience in product development, manufacturing engineering, and project management, Reid has been on the forefront of engineering innovation. His insights will shed a little light onto how designers can really make an impactful decision with the environment and other voiceless stakeholders in mind. So, Reid, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure, Ali. Nice to be here.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and jump in. So, what inspired you to really focus on the concept of the voiceless stakeholder in product design, and particularly concerning environmental impact?
Well, believe it or not, I think what the initial inspiration came from was I was having a conversation with my adult son, who's an avid surfer and consequently spends considerable time in our oceans. He would often comment about how our oceans are a dumping ground for our waste, and especially our plastic waste. He would continue on about how it's not just the large plastics that we routinely see, but also the microplastics that we can't see, which is suspended throughout the depths of the ocean, causing harm to the marine ecosystems and marine life. The environmental impact of plastic waste in our oceans also caught my interest due to its longevity and the forever increasing magnitude of the amount of plastic waste that we continually generate. Plastics and microplastics can remain in our oceans for hundreds, even thousands of years.
Yeah, one thing I did see that I think it was in 2050, there's supposed to be more plastic in the ocean than fish, which is really sad to even think about.
Yeah.
Now, it's a really powerful perspective, and I just want to understand the motivation behind this that really helps frame the importance of product design in a broader context. So, how can we actually implement this approach through governance models that can really help address those environmental challenges posed by this plastic waste?
Well, typically there's two different governance models today. There's shareholder governance and stakeholder governance. A stakeholder corporate governance model always made a lot of sense to me because when done well, each impacted entity is defined as an assessment is made on whether each entity is positively or negatively impacted by the company's policies and the product it produces. The stakeholders could be an internal or an external to the organization. The company stakeholders are not only the investors looking for a return on their financial investment, but also the employees looking for gainful employment, the customers looking for goods and services, the suppliers providing their goods and services to the company, and even our communities and local governments. The voiceless stakeholder that is many times negatively impacted by our plastic waste in our oceans. If an entity is deemed negatively impacted, an evaluation is made to identify if any corrective action could be made that could reverse that negative impact. All too often during a company's product development phase, a thorough assessment is not conducted to determine what steps could be taken to minimize the negative impacts to the environment throughout the life cycle of the product we produce and consume.
It's really great to hear how those governance models can actually play a role in mitigating some of these environmental impacts. Now, shifting focus slightly, let's dive into some of those decision-making process when it comes to choosing those actual materials. Now, what would you say some of those key factors that product designers should really consider when selecting these materials to really minimize that environmental impact?
Yeah, good question. I think first we need to consider what will happen with the product when it reaches its end of life and its usefulness in the life cycle process. If the product's life ends with being discarded as waste, do a thorough evaluation of the product. And could it be produced from biodegradable raw materials, or if the product could be made from recyclable raw materials? I'm a believer that far too often the raw material selection is made based on which is the most cost effective and not necessarily which is the best choice for all impacted stakeholders. Implementing solutions at the source when selecting the raw material is far more impactful rather than trying to address a problem after it becomes a problem.
Now, I think those are critical considerations for designers that they really need to implement. But in business landscape, where shareholders' really interest often dominate, how can companies really find that balance?
And, I'm a believer that corporate profit can be good and is necessary, as that's what drives our economic engine. As much as I dislike federal, state, and local governments getting involved through corporate regulations, I think a lot could be done where governments and corporations could partner together, incentivizing corporations to select likely higher cost but more environmentally friendly raw materials. Some of these incentives could be through tax credits. This could help offset the added cost of higher cost raw materials, supporting corporate profits, which make company shareholder and stakeholders align with each of their particular interests.
Balancing sustainability with profitability is certainly challenging, but you provide a lot of insights that make a clear path forward for our listeners and readers. I just want to thank you today for sharing some of your extensive knowledge and practical insights on designing with the voiceless stakeholder in mind. It's clear that the path to sustainable product development requires holistic approach, one that really integrates thoughtful governance, material selection, and a balance between profit and environmental responsibility. So we appreciate your time today and your actionable guidance you provided. Thank you to our listeners. And if you'd like to read the full white paper, go ahead and follow the link below. Thank you so much, Reid.
Thank you, Elliot. It's a pleasure.